Hello, everyone. This is Shanka Ponsley and Andrea Ferguson for The Shanks Show. If you can hear us, type yes. Type yes in the chat.
Yes, yes, yes.
Yes, yes, yes. All right. We have another great topic today, and that is the importance of boundaries in business. Andrea.
We've all done it. We've all let our boundaries be crossed. And I think it's really important to, first of all, figure out why that's happening before figuring out why it's happening, figure out what is happening. I don't know. What do you think is most important? Understanding the why or the what? Because sometimes it's easier to articulate how you feel, which is exhausted or anxious or irritable or feeling guilty. Sometimes it's easier to figure that out. And then you think, well, why is that? So what do you think?
Usually, with people who have their boundaries not respected, it is more of the what because they are often not realizing that boundaries are crossed. So they have a feeling that they're frustrated, and that is their why. I think they somehow inherently understand that something goes too far, but they may not understand what is being crossed and in which way it is crossed, because in professional life there are a lot of expectations that go too far when it comes to how client interactions go, and even at your workplace it's just a lot of entitlement going on of we own you and we can penetrate into your personal time space whenever we choose, and that is very frustrating.
Ooh, I think so you bring up so many good points. So Forbes actually has an article that talks about why boundaries are important for entrepreneurs and how to have more of them.
I think it has to do with how much of an authority you are and whether you position yourself in a way where you don't have to serve others and you just have to be the apex. You know, if
Yeah.
you are the authority, if everybody has to look up to you, well, then others have to fall in place. Is anyone going to tell Apple how to build their computers?
Yeah.
No, right? But those that build accessories for Apple and want to get certified, they have to meet all the expectations and meet the specifications to get that seal of approval. This is vital, but it's not easy. It's easy to say, but it's not easy to do, because you have to be in a position where your business or your intellectual capacity produce value that nobody else can deliver. And that is the that is the whole name of the game in business.
Yeah. So if you don't have your own values established or your own core values defined, no one else can do that for you. Basically, it all comes down to what you will and will not tolerate. So you need to figure that out for yourself.
So the problem is always that you are, as a business, anxious to get revenue. And when it is the moment to talk about boundaries, you don't talk about them because you're afraid that won't lead to the sale or the signature. And in many cases, it probably wouldn't. It's just something very natural to do and avoid the difficult conversations to get to a conversion. But it just always catches up with you. Always, always does.
So that's so important because my mother always said the way a thing begins is the way it ends.
Yeah.
And the way you set something up, if you don't have that boundary from the beginning, well, all of a sudden you can't be available on Saturdays or Sundays, but you were every other Saturday and Sunday leading up to this point. So
yeah, boundaries are, like you said, time, availability, but also there's financial boundaries. And one financial boundary, for example, is you deciding that you will not do free work no matter what, and no matter what the other person's perspective is. So that's why we have bids that we recently gave that were rejected, because it was clear that there was not going to be any discounted work. But that's a good thing, because when you clearly set boundaries, you keep predators out of your life. So that includes companies not accepting proposals that were never going to be good for you.
I agree. But if you say something and you don't follow through, then it just means you're not honoring your values. And if you do free work from the beginning, obviously there's sample work, there's having a portfolio, there's showing that you're good at your craft, and that's different. But if you
Well,
start,
that's also arguable. That is a valid point, because that is being used to get work out of freelancers non-stop, create a sample this, create a sample that. It is literally, you have people who do nothing but get samples from millions of freelancers, and then they never have to pay.
that is a point. But you need to decide what you will and will not tolerate. If you give out free samples or free work, or you begin the relationship with an overvalue of work, that's a tough one, because we've been in the situation before where we have over delivered work, and then it's that expectation is that you continue when it was outside of scope from the beginning. Even if it wasn't on paper, your actions don't match and you're not honoring your own values. So the point is that you have to establish your core values and figure it out from the beginning, what you will and you won't tolerate. And that leads us to the next point, which is being clear and transparent. If you are not clear and transparent from the beginning, then you set yourself up for failure.
Yeah, so much in business has to do with overcoming your fears. And there's definitely a fear of transparency and clarity that happens all the time, mostly connected to rejection. It's just something that we as humans have when we grow up. We don't want to be rejected, and then we're not clear about our boundaries. Similarly, in business, we don't want to not get the contract awarded to us, so we're not clear in our values. It's really interesting, and I have done this mistake over and over again myself. It's very easily said, but very hardly done. It's very difficult to do this because, I don't know, you probably progress a lot slower if you were very clear and steady and stood by all your values. Progress would be slower, but I would argue that whenever it does, you do make a step forward. It's a higher quality step.
Oh
it's
my
a more
goodness.
sustainable step, and you get out of the situation what you want.
100%, I agree. And I think that so that leads to the next point, which is about being prepared for pushback and confusion. So when you set your boundaries from the beginning, there is that pushback.
Yep. And also, not only in the beginning, but also down the road, because there's this thing that people use, and I don't know why. I even tell that to myself sometimes. It's like, well, no, we are started it this way, and we gotta finish it that way. Well, here's the thing. If it's not in a contract, that's absolutely not true.
Agreed.
You have the right to change your mind based on experience. And if you go into something not knowing what you sign up for, and then you found out what you sign up for, well, then maybe you want to say, okay, well, that's fine, but then here are my new conditions.
Yeah, it all comes down to my conditions, your price, or my price, your conditions.
Yeah.
And a lot of times when you set yourself up in business that way, it's okay because at least you're being compensated for it. And if you're not, then you're not doing as much work. And it's not that like we don't want to work, but everybody should be paid their worth. Everybody should be paid what they agree to. There needs to be a mutual understanding of the exchange of goods. And not only that, but how you operate. That matters a lot. And so what you're saying right now makes a lot of sense, because once you start changing the nature of the work, then you set your boundaries, and then all of a sudden there's pushback or confusion. Well, there's a reason for that, because you are honoring your own value. And back to the very beginning, what we were talking about, if everybody knows Susie goes to church on Sunday, non-negotiable, nobody's going to ask Susie to show up for X, Y, and Z during the peak of her church service. But if Susie misses Sundays for 3 months, then all of a sudden, and maybe she does come too. She says, you know, this is a value that I've always had. I never really did agree to coming on Sundays, but I just did it because I wanted, you know what I mean? Like I wanted to be accessible, or I wanted to do whatever. And then there's confusion and pushback, but that's okay, because as you're saying, people have the right to change their mind, and people have the right to say that never should have been, I overvalued X, Y, or Z.
Yep.
And then the last thing is to get used to saying no and meaning it.
Yeah. Well, be prepared for a lot of pushback. People hate. We live in a time where the word no is not very easily received by anyone, and there's a fundamental contradiction in what modern contemporary mindset wants you to believe, which is that it's okay to set boundaries. But the moment you do, it's not okay. And
you
here's
have the
the
right
thing.
to say no.
Yeah,
Not
well,
really.
and there's always this problem between it's okay to say no to what the mainstream thinks it's okay to say no to, but the moment you say no to something that is not mainstream, then you're in trouble. And it's just something we have to deal with it these days. And the only way to not have to deal with it is to be absolutely the owner of your space, your life, whether that is business or personal life. But it's difficult to get there. You have to be in a position where everybody looks up to you and has to play by your rules. And we're not all that awesome and valuable. And this is something again where a lot of people would say, well, that's not very nice to say because every person has inherent value. But
We're Nietzsche over here. We don't believe that.
No, we don't believe that. We think that every person deserves respect and has a reason to be there, and also, of course, value can have so many different meanings. Is it business value? Is it sentimental value? Is it romantic value?
Is it value that can't be measured with a number?
But we're usually talking about business, Andrea and I. So yeah.
Yeah, but so it is important to communicate your needs in everyday life, in business, in relationships, especially the workplace, to keep yourself from getting exhausted.
Yeah.
Having trouble making decisions because you're afraid of disrupting maybe not even afraid, but you just know that it could fracture or disrupt the relationship.
Yeah.
You don't want to feel guilty or anxious or any of those things. But the reality is that once you do all those things, especially if you are leading a team, it will be less chaotic and it will be more manageable because you're not taking your whole crew along with you on this chaotic, turbulent ride because you stuck to your values, you honored that. I feel like the clients that I love working the most with, they understand our value. They allow us to work how we do. They let us do our thing. And in return, everybody kind of has peace of mind because the expectations were set. And if there was a redefining of what that meant, then that happened. You just need to communicate. You need to communicate and never be afraid to implement those things we're talking about. And start with yourself. Start with understanding your why, not your why, your Simon Sinek why, but I mean your why does this matter to you? Well, if I don't go to church, I'm not Susie talking about church. If we don't go to panaderia on the weekend, you feel some kind of way about it, don't you?
Yeah, I mean, I missed something.
Yeah. Well, but that's a value to you is what I'm saying.
Yeah.
Like you enjoy San Antonio and you enjoy getting your torta, which is a sandwich. And that means something to you. You like crafting time around going to do that. That's a value that you hold, is like being able to enjoy your lunch on a Saturday or Sunday or whatever. Doesn't mean you're not a hard worker, but that's kind of a place where you would draw the line in the sand if you had to get rid of that every weekend, right? So figuring out those things, I'm sure there's a much better example than that. Can you think of a better example before we?
No, because I'm right about to have to go upstairs and be on my daily content
Oh,
call.
you're telling me that's a value of yours, is showing up for your.
Yeah, and also having
community.
10 minutes prior to starting that call. By the way, go to contentmasters.club, and then you can see what I do every morning. I meet with people who want to know what they can do online to grow their personal brand. And you could be one of those people on my Zoom call every morning. See how I snuck in a CTA here, Andrea? Yeah, I snuck.
All right. Well, thanks for listening to us. Let us know if you have mastered the art of establishing your core values and setting your boundaries and how you did that. really curious to know. We'll talk to you soon.